Hello, hello. My name is Jamila, and I am your Zoom host for this session. And I'm thrilled to be welcoming you to the EMDR certificate, week 9. And today we'll begin our class, The Body Keeps the Score, EMDR and Trauma, with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, Carrie Powers, and Dr. Scott Lyons. So please, as you're entering into the room, you can go ahead and put in the chat where you're Zooming in from. And as our community gathers, we love to acknowledge that the land we live and work on is the traditional territory of many Indigenous peoples. So we respectfully honor their people, cultures, and traditions. If you know the unceded territory you're on, feel free to put that in the chat, or maybe this is time for you to look that up and add it to the chat. And with that, I'll go ahead and I'd love to welcome Carrie Powers, Dr. Scott Lyons, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. I'm going to read your bio. It's his first time here with us in this session. So he is a pioneer in trauma research, founded a leading center in 1984 dedicated to studying and treating traumatic stress. His groundbreaking work includes early studies on SSRIs and PTSD, neuroimaging research on trauma's impact on the brain, and linking BPD and self-injury to early childhood trauma. He played a key role in establishing the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, funding 150 centers nationwide. His focus is on developing effective interventions, including studies on EMDR, yoga, neurofeedback to stabilize physiology and enhance executive functioning in traumatized individuals. His efforts led to the Trauma Center, now the Trauma Research Foundation, impacting treatment approaches nationwide. He is the author of the New York bestseller, The Body Keeps the Score. With that, I'd love to hand it over to you all.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. Bessel, thank you so much for being here. We'll put all of our videos up, Carrie and Bessel and I, and welcome. We're so excited to chat with you today about your work in EMDR. And Carrie, I'll turn it over to you for the first kind of question to launch the conversation off.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you, Scott, and Bessel, it's just an honor to talk to you today. I've learned so much from you. So one of the questions we have is, can you share your history with EMDR and what that's been like for you, your journey with it?
Well, I first heard about EMDR. I was visiting Israel in 1989, and there was this, people said there's this weird woman, Francine Shapiro, who's about here wiggling her fingers in front of people's eyes. Would you like to meet her? I know I don't know people who wiggle their fingers in front of people's eyes. And so I dismissed it. And then some people in my clinic started to do what I call wiggling. They started to move their fingers in front of people's faces. And I immediately told them to stop that because we are at Harvard and we don't wiggle and do weird things like that. And then some of my patients went for trainings. They were psychologists, and they were transformed by it. And as a clinician, I felt really sort of left out. Here, spending all this energy on people, and they go to some damn workshop and they get better, and I had nothing to do with it. So, what am I missing? And then some people in the clinic really got into videotaping EMDR sessions, and before too long, it became clear that there was something remarkable going on. And basically, being a neuroscientist at heart, I want to know what the hell happens in people's brains that before you give them EMDR, they're freaked out about a particular memory. And afterwards they go like, yeah, it happened, it really sucked. But they can put it in the past. And for me, that was to see those videos was like, wow, what happens in the brain that we can reorganize it? And that question I raised back in 1994, and now it is 30 years later. And we haven't come very far in that regard. Actually, it has been astounding that the reason that I got to do EMDR research is because at that point I was still a very respectable person because I studied drugs. And as a psychiatrist, studying drugs means you're a real scientist. And what our drug researchers showed us that PTSD was not in a major way affected by SSRIs. So there was no money in the Andar Hills. But I did the first research on Prozac, so that gave me my credits. And so I went to NIMH and said, I'd like to study something reasonable like Prozac and compare to that crazy method EMDR, very popular. It probably won't work. And then we did the research, and the research was, as far as I know, still sort of the best outcome research in the history of trauma, actually. That we found that people with adult onset trauma, people whose trauma was not child abuse and neglect, which is a different category, but people who had been raped in car accidents, etc., we had like an 88% cure rate. It's really just stunning. But the big difference we found in our study is something that I've been talking about for a long time and urging on people, and I've not been as successful as I wish I were, in that people with early histories of childhood abuse and neglect did not do dramatically better on the EMDR. And so what we found in our study is that these images, that core PTSD issue. PTSD is defined by nightmares and flashbacks, basically. And PTSD classic. That the images and the triggers really settle down dramatically. But our research showed is that people whose trauma was child abuse and neglect did not do particularly well. Some of them did well, some of them got worse. And so that is a much more complex population. And so I went back numerous times to NIH to study that further. And that my study was the last study funded by NIH. It's actually stunning to me how treatment that can be as amazingly effective as EMDR, that clearly is an odd thing. Why there's so little interest in it. And what my colleagues say about EMDR, what is new about it is not good, and what's good about it is not new. And I go, really? Do you know anybody about EMDR? But the prejudice against EMDR has been stunning to me. Yeah? And that tells us how we are being married to our cultural paradigm. And the example I'd like to give is the first time I went to China, it was 1992, and China was just post-Mao, very shut down, very homesick, they're not very friendly. And I see 10,000 Chinese in the park below my hotel making these Qigong movements. And I said, why are these people not in their therapist's office talking about their mothers? Like, what the hell in the park making these weird movements? And have nothing else to do. I go into the park and make the same weird movements. And my body starts feeling so much calmer. And I go, that's interesting. In China, you cannot talk about your past. Again, today still, talking about your feelings, no. But boy, in every park in China today, people are doing Qigong and Tai Chi. And so what that brought home for me is that we're located in the cultural paradigm that we're located in. And that in certain cultures, you do something and you may be very good at that. For example, about Africa, great musical involvement in trauma, people moving, people dancing, people getting rhythms, clearly very helpful. If we would do that at Harvard, people would go, my God, it's really gone off the deep end doing drumming and make music with people. And so it's all the cultural paradigm. And for me, EMDR really brought home like, wow, that's interesting. Our cultural paradigm is we take drugs and popping a pill into your mouth is perfectly normal. Nobody ever say, I'm taking a drug for my depression and my anxiety. Well, it makes perfect sense because popping pills is culturally acceptable. I call this our post-alcoholic culture. The Western culture has always been based on if you feel bad, you take a swig. And that's what people do, in fact. And now, aside from taking swigs, people also smoke dope. And that is culturally acceptable, putting chemicals in your body. But actually doing something different doesn't fit within a cultural paradigm. So what EMDR really opened up for me is how we're stuck in these paradigms of yakking and drugs. And it's all the people there. And for me, EMDR was the really entry into a whole new universe of changing some rhythms in the body. And for me, that really was, EMDR for me was the gateway drug for me. like that. Wow, I mean, this is weird. No, nobody can say no. It's not the weird method. Wiggling your fingers in the that's weird. And so, for me, it opened up like, wow, weird stuff works. And then people come to talk to me, say, we have been doing yoga with rape survivors and with soldiers. And would you like to study yoga for PTSD? And I go, putting your butt in the air, treatment for PTSD, twisting your body into a pretzel, treatment for PTSD. Let's go for it. So we did the first study on yoga for PTSD. And it turned out that yoga was more helpful than any psychiatric drugs. Of course, I didn't see a single psychopharm clinic become a yoga clinic because there's no money in Demdar Hills. You can make much more money giving people drugs. But so it really made me aware of our cultural paradigm and how, and to this day, the American Psychological Association grits their teeth when they give you credit for doing EMDR, but every year they put it down a little bit further and put my research down a little bit further, like, oh, they must have been biased. Oh, they were not controlling things well enough. This is a very carefully done study, but the cognitive behavioral people who run the show say, no, it worked because he was biased. And so I think that's where our field is so stuck, is are we willing to open up new possibilities, mainly having to do with movement and rhythm, actually.
Bessel, can we talk about some of the details of like your particular findings in that research, like some of the key features or things that you were even surprised about or delighted by?
Well, the Steve La sorry,
Take your time, my friend.
Steve Lazov, many years ago, came and showed me this tape. And anybody ever heard me speak has seen those tapes because I love to show those tapes all the time and never tire of them. And what you see in the tape is that after 2 sessions, the woman's body is completely changed. Before she's sitting like this, and her body obviously is reliving the trauma. I think it's an essential part. If you want to be trauma informed, you need to know that the body holds the trauma, and that the body relives the trauma, and the body re-experiences the trauma. And all my understanding and insight psychotherapy had not changed the physiological functions. And then in that EMDR tape, and then did EMDR research, we showed that after a session or two of EMDR, the body calms down. And that was very striking, is that, but what we found, and I think still deserves much more attention, what we found is that EMDR allowed a sensation to become a memory, which is a very profound observation, that when people are traumatized, their body relives the trauma. And EMDR was the first time I saw a treatment where after people get the treatment, their bodies don't remember what happened, their minds remember it, but their bodies come into the present. Now, to my mind, what is a more interesting scientific question than what the hell happens here that when you move your eyes from side to side, your body is able to go like, yes, it really happened, and it happened a long time ago. And I've been just stunned how it has been almost impossible to get money to look at that very simple, critical question, which is sort of undergirds so much of the work that we do. How do we help people who are traumatized to not live in bodies that are stuck back then,
Yeah.
and live in bodies that are right now in April 2024 and say, yes, I've had some really crappy stuff happening to me, but today's April 2024, and I'm here and I'm alive.
Yeah.
So EMDR for me was really the first time that I saw that. And what's so beautiful about EMDR, it was so bizarre. And so then you go like, oh, so maybe things that don't fit into our little cultural paradigms may work. And then people say, tapping acupressure points works. That's crazy if you're European, North American. And then it turns out that works too.
Yeah.
And it turns out that singing together works and moving together works. And that and our culture really hasn't moved with that. Even the psychotherapy culture, I think the Embodied Lab may be much more of a vanguard than you may think about yourself, actually, because you live in a world where everybody pays
Yeah.
attention to the body.
Yeah.
So you don't think it's unusual at all. You know, you go to any hospital, and you go, body? What's a body? You know?
Well, one of the things, oh, sorry, Kurt. One of the things I really appreciated you framing in your research with the EMDR is you talked about how it went like in PTSD, it went from like a floating, timeless emotion or body sensation to that sensation and that feeling having a container, a context to allow it to then be whole and processed.
Yeah, it really
Appreciate that.
becomes a memory. Huh?
Yeah.
And it's not that you block anything or you put a barrier between something, something happens. And it happens like our talking together. I'm
Yeah.
having fun talking with you, but a year from now, we both remember it very well because oh yeah, I had this talk with you know, uh, but we won't
Yeah.
remember any detail
Yeah.
because memory is active and constructive and
Yeah.
integrative, and whatever happens becomes like a part of a very large ocean of experience. And what is so unique about trauma is that that particular imprint at a particular point starts becoming frozen in time
Yeah.
and keep going back there again. It's interesting. This weekend, there's a conference at Yale, which I'm very pleased about, it called Embodied Self-Awareness.
Mhm.
And I'm going to talk in honor of my friend Stephen Southwick, who has since died, who did the first experiment so evoking flashbacks and people saying, I saw my friend getting killed just like it was.
Mhm.
And that's the unique part of traumatic memory, is that it doesn't get digested. It doesn't get integrated. It has a life of its own. And if you don't know that, you don't know trauma. Like that this is really that it's Freud used to call it a splinter in the mind.
Mm.
It just sits there, burrowing its way into your mind, and you try to wall it off, but the infection keeps going on. Huh? And what we saw with EMDR is that, and again, not all cases, and I think people tend to get too fanatical about their methods. I think EMDR is a very useful tool in your toolbox.
Yeah.
But to say I'm an EMDR therapist, to me is a little bit like saying I'm a hammer carpenter. You cannot build a house without a hammer, but you need a bunch more other instruments to really make it happen also. So EMDR is a great method for traumatic memories, not for betrayal, not for abandonment, not for autism, not for identity of basically I'm a terrible, horrible human being who is no good. I don't think EMDR really does a lot for that.
Mhm.
Once you calm down the traumatic memory, all kind of other processes may take place.
Mhm.
But to my mind, EMDR is a memory treatment.
Mhm. Mhm. I have one more follow-up question with your research, Bessel. Which is, you said something that I think is was a bit shocking to me when I reread it, which was that you said that successful treatment of PTSD does not reduce arousal at the limbic level, but instead enhances the ability to differentiate real and threat.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh, that was a surprising statement to me.
Yeah. No, some other project I'm doing
Yeah.
is about looking at habits.
Yeah.
And PTSD really is a habit.
Mm.
Whenever somebody comes sexual with me, I have a panic reaction.
Mm.
I freeze. My habit is that when somebody puts a hand on my shoulder, in my whatever part of me, that I go and become terrified.
Mm.
Sometimes it's appropriate to get terrified. Sometimes it's appropriate to say, boy, feels good. Do some more of that. But once you're traumatized, you have this automatic reaction where you wish that you didn't have it, and you feel ashamed about yourself. And that becomes a very big issue, is that I have these weird reactions, and this person is doing something that I think I really like, but
Mm.
I freak out and I feel like a little child who's getting raped.
Mm.
And so it's these involuntary reactions that really is the nature of trauma. Actually.
Mm. That makes sense. Harry, I'll pass it to you.
I'm just curious if you can talk about a case study where you've kind of gone through a journey of EMDR treatment with someone where you found it was really helpful and maybe helpful to our
Well,
students.
I have a number of cases in my book that are very dramatic of because I brought it up. I mean, I've seen numerous cases of EMDR. I use EMDR routinely. 1 out of 3 sessions I use EMDR with people. And for example, in the book, I have a case of a guy who was assaulted as a lifeguard. And ever since then, he had temper tantrums whenever he was bullying people, he was crude with people, and he had become this sort of really defensive, angry guy with one eye who had been bullied. And then we went back over the incidents where there was a fight in which his eye was injured. And once the memory calmed itself down, he started to be able to listen to other people. He started to be able to negotiate things. And so when you traumatize, your emotions want to show. And so that's why I think the whole idea of CBT for trauma is so bizarre, because the C part, the cognitive part, is actually what goes offline. Nobody who's in their trauma can be rational, or if the rational is like, I'm being an asshole and I can't help it. But it's not like people will that or people decide to overreact. People get in a state of terror, fear, and rage, and then they can't hear other people's point of view. So it becomes very hard to get along with each other. But once the trauma is metabolized means is once it has become a memory about something that happened a long time ago, and that's really what it does. It stores it into your memory system. And then you go like, oh, that's what I felt like back then. But today I'm a 45-year-old grown-up person and I live in a different body as I did back then. And that's really the big issue here, is that the trauma has to become a memory of the past and not a reliving of the present.
I'm curious about, you said before that maybe with betrayal, it doesn't work so well. And I wanted to see if you could say more about that.
Well, it's because, every moment your brain is organizing information. And if right now something terrible happens, you see this sometimes that somebody gets shot in public or something, then your memory system you get hyper aroused and your memory system breaks down. And if you're in a room and somebody gets assassinated, you see it, you will have an image of that happening. I mean, that's what like EMT people struggle with all the time. Police people, they come to scenes of car accidents, domestic violence, people who are suicided, and these images of those bodies just get seared in your brain. And that makes you more and more afraid to see stuff that reminds you of it, and makes you more and more uptight and more constricted. And once you can process those memories, you can back into the present. But betrayal and abandonment is a different story. It's not a memory. It's not what you see. It is a feeling of I'm all by myself. Uh, People don't care if I'm alive or dead. Nobody gives a shit about me. And that is something that I don't think responds very well to EMDR. It's in question, but it hasn't been studied. And it's a question worth thinking about is, can you instill new memories or new perceptions in people while you make the eye movements? But at this point in time, 2024, things keep evolving. If you want to really implant new experiences, I think psychedelics are way superior to EMDR. That's it.
What do you mean by new experiences as opposed to reframing an old experience?
So if let's say you're a neglected kid, and people tell you, as happens to a lot of people, you were a family, dad split after you were born, you such an awful child, you ruined our marriage, all these things that kids are told all the time. That is really a basic message of being an unacceptable and unwanted person. And I don't think that responds very well to EMDR. It's something that's one of the major questions in our field, actually, because overall, trauma has become the paradigm, the cultural paradigm right now that we live in. But that is not the biggest issue. And the biggest issue is actually neglect and not being seen, not being looked after, not being part of a community. And that doesn't really fall under the category of trauma. The category of who you are in relationship to the troop that you live in. We're primates, we're monkeys with a big head. And we're meant to live in troops. That's how we're geared. And once you become an unacceptable person who has odd reaction, you always feel like you don't belong and you're not part of a larger group and that you are defective. And I think those issues, I know that Lauren Purnell and Debbie Korn, who I both respect a great deal, say that they can use EMDR for those issues. And that may be possible, but we don't have scientific proof of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, as we're talking about like kind of the expansion from the classical model, you know, as folks are bringing in attachment overlays with EMDR, like the folks you mentioned, you know, I'm curious about in your own from, you know, researching, studying, practicing EMDR, and then when you started hanging out with like Pat Ogden and Peter Levine, how did all of those start to interface with each other for you? Or did they, you know, the somatic, the body-based therapy and EMDR?
So it's interesting. You know, all of that happened around the same time.
Yeah. Okay.
No, 1994 was really the year for me. That it was
A big
the
year.
year that I got kicked out of Harvard for being too active in testifying on behalf of priestly abuse, sexually abuse. So it all came, so in some ways, our whole edifice came down because of false memory syndrome and all the backlash against the priest abuse stuff. And at the same time, the world was wide open. And so, and you're at a certain age, and then your mind is also wide open. There's the way I see it, if you go to school and your main occupation go to school, you want to be good students, and you want your teachers to like you, and you want to be an obedient, good, approved of person. Yeah. And so then you go to school, you do all these things, and then when you're about 8, 10 years out, you start realizing, now I really do all the things that my teachers told me to do, but it isn't working. But it takes a long time before you get out of that. I have to be obedient and do what the right thing is, what my teachers tell me to do. And so hopefully in all of our lives, there's a moment of like, shit, man, it isn't working. Yeah, I got my $80,000 degree and I'm not getting people better.
80, Bessel, that might have been 20 years ago, it was 80.
Mine was cheaper still. Yeah. But then you go, damn, it isn't working. And then the question is, do you do more of the same and call your patients treatment resistant, or do you go and say, I'm going to learn how I can deal with it? So I was very much at a stage when it all happened. I already had written 2 books. I wrote the very first book with the title PTSD in it, actually, 3 years after PTSD became a diagnosis. And I'd written another book that was very well received also. But I had no treatment chapter. So you can be a great expert without having a treatment chapter. And so at one point, I said, I know a lot about trauma, but I don't know how to treat it. And then I started to really go, EMDR was one bizarre method. Then I met Pat Ogden, and she showed a videotape of her touching a patient and being physical all over a patient. And I say, that's outrageous, Pat, that you're doing it. Touching this person and moving them with their body, a serious boundary violations. And Pat was very generous with me. I don't know how she got to be so patient, because I was really not a very pleasant person to deal with. And she said, oh, I don't think you have looked very carefully yet. Would you like to, can I show you again what I just did? So Pat really treated me like a kindergarten teacher. She was really like, let's look very carefully what happens here. And then slowly, because of her patience and her kindness, I started like, wow, this patient really wakes up. And this patient just gets in touch with their bodies. So I think it was a moment in my life that I was wide open to learn stuff. And the culture happened to be around where a lot of people were doing innovative, interesting stuff. And there's also a time before anybody owned anything. Now you have to go do IFS training or EMDR training or body somatic therapy training. You need to get certified and all this stuff. That's not how it started. It started off with a whole bunch of people saying, what else the hell can we do? And it was much less territorial. And there was a real spirit of, how the hell do we solve this problem? And that's not quite 2024 anymore. Now we are in our little camps and that.
And so how did, as you went from one weird experience to the next with wiggly fingers and Pat touching someone, and I mean, what was your experience with Peter, by the way, when you were introduced to watching him do somatic experiencing?
The way I got to know Peter, I was asked to teach in Essendon, and around the same time. And Essendon is about the body. And the body person I knew best was El Paso, who most of you probably haven't heard about. But El taught me psychodrama, which is actually clinically my most favorite treatment, actually. I love doing it. I love seeing what it does for people. It's great. I don't do it often enough, but it's wonderful. So I took Al to Esselen. Peso was not a collaborative, was not a good colleague, and he was doing his thing, but we were not listening to each other. It wasn't much fun, actually. And then Peter came by because Peter wanted to meet me. And Peter noticed that Al, who was a former dancer, had trouble walking. And Peter said to Al, "Can I work on your body to help your pelvis to relax more?" And I saw Peter work on El Paso. And that for me was really the opening line. He did it so beautifully and so kindly. Helped. He helped this brilliant but quite uptight guy. And so to really have a moment of peacefulness in his body that made him slightly more enjoyable to teach with. I never taught with Al again, by the way, but I taught a lot with Peter because I love teaching with Peter, actually, because Peter had that beautiful, real deep sense of body energy that he really was very good at, still is, actually. Yeah, yeah.
He really can just help facilitate a shift change so exquisitely. It's
It's really, and it's beautiful. And another thing that used to strike me when I used to teach with Peter is that there would be somebody else who would in the room who would be disturbed and creating a ruckus.
Yeah.
And most of us more faint-hearted people would say, "Okay, somebody take care of this person, and I'll work with somebody who's easy to get along with." And people chose the most difficult person in the room and work with them. And I go, boy, that's courageous. Like, I really, really admire that. And then he was able to, with his very calm presence, help the physiology to relax. And it was really just a beautiful thing to witness and a great privilege, actually. Yeah.
And so
Because when Peter and I used to teach together,
yeah.
we worked with the staff in Esalen in the evenings. And I would do EMDR and he would do body.
Huh.
And I think our results were very similar.
Interesting.
But I thought what Peter does was infinitely more elegant than what I was doing.
Say more. And like in what way?
I think my trouble with EMDR was, and
Yeah.
minor issue, in that people, it's so magical. And you do your eye movements, and suddenly the memory is gone. Like, wow, it's gone. But when you see Peter at work, you see what the process is, and I think you only experience more deeply on a subjective level, and you really feel like, oh, I did something.
Yeah.
There's still magic from the outside,
Yeah. That's so funny. That was my challenge with EMDR when I first started it. It was like, no, it feels like it feels too magical. I don't know how we got there. And with all the somatic work, it always felt like, starting with Peter, it always felt like I understand how we got there. Like
Yeah.
I get it. And I appreciated EMDR and the spaciousness, but I never felt like it always felt like there was something more left that wanted to be expressed or
Yeah,
finished. Yeah. I
yeah.
don't know if that's similar to what you're saying.
Oh, yeah, no, but I really learned from both Peter and Pat,
Yeah.
and they quarrel with each other, and they say, "I taught you more than I taught you more." I said, "You both taught me more." What's the fact that both of them are just extraordinarily good trackers.
Yeah.
I think that is really at the heart of all good therapy, is to track people's physiological states and to know how to move that physiological state up and down. And that, to my mind, is really what the therapist does, is to increase and decrease these levels of arousal in a way, and that window of tolerance in a way. And I think the somatic therapies are particularly good at that. And sometimes I meet people who have done EMDR and for whom it didn't work. And I'm always puzzled by that because, and then my reaction is mainly, oh, the people who they were working with did not know how to track them. Because even in EMDR, you need to really track what people can tolerate and when to back up and when to go to safe places, etc., etc. It's still all about the regulation of the physiology. Huh?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Very, I can pass it.
So, you talked about psychodrama, and that is one of my passions as well. So I wanted to hear
Face
more.
light up when I said it. Yeah.
What was that?
I saw your face light up when I mentioned
Oh,
that.
yes. Love psychodrama. I love it. I love it. So I was curious about whether you've kind of integrated any EMDR in that process. And I know you've talked about, I mainly work with people who have complex PTSD. So I'm curious if you found some helpfulness in integrating some of that to work with, the neglect that you were talking about, some of the negative cognitions that come up around that.
Well, yeah, I'm not one of the negative cognition people. Like, oh, you have a
Mhm.
bad thought. I'm too much of an IFS person. I like to say all parts are welcome. That
Mhm.
ruminative thought, that negative thought, that hateful thoughts. It's all part of the deal. Like, I don't combine them.
Mm.
When I do psychodrama, I do psychodrama.
Gotcha.
When I do psychodrama, I very much focus on instilling a false memory of
Mhm.
what your body would have felt like if at age 3 your mom or your dad would have given you what you're getting right now.
Mhm.
So really, I use psychodrama very much as an embodied awareness of where you're stuck in the past and giving people a sense of relief from being stuck in the past.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else that I see being quite as effective as that, actually. It's interesting. We recently, and the movie should be out by now. We did a ketamine workshop in which we combined ketamine with psychodrama. So that's the first time we did a combination. It wasn't my idea to do it, but people saw me do psychodrama, and we also are ketamine trainers. So they said, let's combine the two of them. And the group felt that the psychodrama experience had come in more profoundly while people were in ketamine.
Mhm.
So I think there's real promise of being able to do so. But to my mind, we don't do nearly enough psychodrama. So to start combining psychodrama with other stuff is already one step too far because we're still so very much at a very elementary level of psychodrama training. See?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
But I'm not opposed to combining it. But boy, doing psychodrama is a very serious enterprise, as you know. Like uh, and boundaries need to be very carefully respected. So,
Yeah. What do you
Why
think
do you
is
think?
one? I'm sorry, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
What do you think is the most, kind of effective part? What do you think is helping people change in psychodrama? Mhm.
uh, I think what helps people change psychodrama is indeed getting a physical experience
Mhm.
of what um, what it feels like to be a loved child. There's something about psychodrama which is fascinating to me. I mean, I wish I could do a lot of work on them. I'm getting a little old for that, but boy, I'm really curious about it. In psychodrama, you put things out in three-dimensional space,
Mhm.
and working in space activates the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere is not a cognitive part of your brain, it's the emotional part of your brain. And what's just stunning to me every time I do psychodrama is that when you put your mom in the room and your dad in the room and your older brother in the room, they come to life. And I've worked with several hundred people by now, and some of the toughest people you can imagine. And when somebody chooses somebody to play his father, that person becomes their father.
Mhm.
So there's something that the skepticism goes away, and you start having the feelings towards that person who you put there, which are the feelings you have back there for that person. And then if you give people an ideal father who would have done the right things at this point, and that person holds your touches you, you're like, oh, that's what it would have felt like. and you get an imprint of an experience that you never had. And to my mind, it's EMDR is about dealing with the experience that you had. But EMDR is not about dealing with the experience that you didn't have. So EMDR is very good for, I saw that. I saw my little sister getting molested. I saw my brother getting killed by a drunk driver. And there's images of something that happened. But psychodrama for me is for what didn't happen. I wasn't welcomed into this world. My parents beat me up instead of paying attention to me, etc. It's about what you didn't get and how do you insert something in people that was never there. And it's a very important issue for us as psychotherapists, because as psychotherapists, we like to give people corrective emotional experiences. Give people experience. And what El Peso pointed out to me, and very grateful to him forever, he says, it's the wrong person at the wrong time at the wrong place. I, as an 80-year-old person, cannot give you as a, let's say 45, I can't guess your age, woman, the feeling of what it would be like if your mom would have loved you when you were 3 years old. I cannot, there's a mismatch. So you need to be in a new visceral experience where you actually, that your mind is wide open for some new input, and then to use your imagination. And to my mind, psychedelics and psychodrama are quite nicely in that particular direction of putting new things into people's experiences.
Can you say more about?
But there's an EMDR thing. I'd say if you want to become a trauma therapist, I'd say maybe EMDR is the best place to start. Because you don't need to be a genius to do EMDR. It's a relatively simple technique. You need to learn to track people, but it's about as simple as it gets. As you know, psychodrama is a hell of a lot more complicated.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I think there's something, I mean, because it can feel overwhelming, especially with so many words in EMDR. They love a word and they love acronyms. And so it can feel very like overwhelming. But I think, you know, when you get to the heart of EMDR, there is a simplicity to it that's really beautiful. It's not that it's simple to just navigate trauma, but there's a simplicity to it that's really.
Not only that, but I think it shows you the processes.
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty. Now, I don't know if people are not so much into history these days, but Freud was really looking very hard for the best method to deal with all the early stuff. And he created free associations. But when I was lying on the couch and being psychoanalyst, I was way too uptight about what my analyst was thinking about me to ever give him free associations. I mainly loved for years being ashamed about what an uninteresting person I was. That wasn't very helpful. But this opening people up to get new stuff in is the critical issue. And so free association was really, it's about combining everything that's happened to you. Freud was looking for it, but when I did EMDR, I said, that's what he was looking for. EMDR allows your mind to associate and to make a non-cognitive process. And then we did a neuroimaging study actually with Shireen Herzarian and Bruce Nannies, and we showed actually that with EMDR, you get brain circuits get activated that allow you to observe what happens and to create a temporal context for it. I know, it's a very tough neuroscience paper, but you can look it up. It's on our website. But it's very, very tough paper. It's very, very brainy.
It wasn't that tough. Come on.
EMDR,
I read it this morning again. It's not that.
You should-
You Yeah, you write very accessibly, Bessel. Like I
No,
have
no,
to
no. But the paper, the
the
paper
research paper. Yeah.
uh,
I think you write, I think you have enough credit for like it's tough, but you write very accessibly and it's very it has a way of being relatable even in an academic language. So I'll
but,
just say
but you know, I'm really very pleased that you guys started with EMDR
yeah.
because it's so fundamental. Because EMDR is really about what trauma is about, huh? That unintegrated memory. But now trauma has become everything else, also neglect, abandonment, blah, 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 blah. But in terms of PTSD, EMDR is the way to go. Yeah.
Uh, I'm curious, Bessel, as we go back and you were talking about what the ketamine did for psychodrama, like it opens it mills the soil or tills the soil, whatever the word is, to allow for something new to grow. It, have you come across other things besides psychedelics that sort of till that soil to allow something more fertile that hasn't been there to grow?
Well, it looks like, and it's so exciting to see things develop and to where they go. And then I have my annual conference where I can actually
Yeah, totally.
find people who do it, so I get to check with. But so one of the main speakers at our conference this year is Gul Dolan, who is a basic lab researcher working with animals, looking at how psychedelics change critical periods. And her work is maybe the most important work in psychiatry that I've seen up to this point, because in psychological disturbances, you are stuck. And we always try to get people unstuck. And sometimes EMDR, again, gets people unstuck after adult trauma, usually does not get people unstuck after childhood trauma. And so it looks like the psychedelics open up people's habit system to create new habits, the default mode network. And this is really, this is hopefully going to change our field in that we can help under psychedelics put things into people that have absolutely this point, and we can help the brain to grow during a certain period of time. We can actually take in new experiences and learn from it. The way that the brain is organized is you need to learn something at different stages, and then your possibility to learn it closes. A good example is my accents. If you know anything about learning language, you should know that before age 13 about, you learn a new language and you speak it flawlessly. After age 13, your mouth has been formed in a certain way, and it's almost impossible to learn a new language without having an accent.
Yeah.
The brain is no longer capable of it. Here's an empirical question for me. Should I lose my accent if I do working on my accent on psychedelics? It's a very real question.
That's really interesting.
And that's the least of our problems, of course, is your accent.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Have you noticed a shift
No,
in
no,
any
I'm just,
language
I'd like to
Okay.
give the accent as an example of
Yeah, yeah,
critical
no, I know.
that it closes.
Mm,
You know, there's some people who learn three new languages, but it's very rare. But
yeah,
same thing, it happens with love.
yeah,
Huh? If you don't get loved before age 3, it is very hard to get an imprint of love in your being. Huh?
yeah.
And our latest MDMA research seems to really show that that can be opened up by MDMA.
That's amazing.
No, and then all the other therapies that we do become amplified in a way. Huh?
Yeah.
Like I've worked with Peter for many years, and the love work with him, and I saw him do beautiful work. But even after his beautiful work, people were oftentimes not permanently changed.
Mm, mm,
They continue to be uptight in their bodies, and it's not like the next day people were dancers, and people the next day people were just wide open. And a very important question for me right now is, can we do somatic therapies while people are in psychedelics and put things into their minds when their mind is wide open to give them something that they didn't get before?
Yeah. Yeah.
Huge issue.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really frontier research.
It is. This is why I want to stay alive a little bit longer to see what goes with all this issue.
I hope you do. I think we can take some time to move to the Q&A box, and we'll read through some of your questions, and we'll call some people forward to ask their questions. Sue Redmond, if you want to ask your question, if we want to, for the questions when we ask them live, we're going to ask that you consolidate them. Let go of any personal narratives attached to the question, so you can give more just the question to Bessel, so we can get through more questions. So Sue, if you want to raise your hand and talk to the group, you're welcome to. And if not, if I don't see your hand, I can read your question. Oh, I see your hand, Sue. All right. In the car. I hope you're not driving, but maybe you
In
are.
the car. No, I'm not driving.
Good sound system. What kind of car? Excellent sound system.
No, AirPods. I thought was at a funeral, so sorry. It has to be done this way.
Right.
So my question was, I'm working with a young person at the moment, and I was doing some EMDR with him, and I found that he became more activated. He was going up the scale instead of down. And so I stopped and I did a bit of BLS with him, and he actually came down. So that bilateral, beautiful butterfly tap, and it brought him down, and we were able to get to a lovely stage. And I just wanted to understand a little bit more about what's actually happening in the brain in terms of EMDR. Is it the amygdala and the hippocampus? Is that what's changing with the eye movement? And then also what's happening in the body when we do that bilateral? What's actually, I want to know if we know. Maybe we don't know, and I'm okay with that too.
That's why we wrote that paper, and so everybody now knows the word amygdala, and most people know the word hippocampus, and then they think they sound smart when they use these terms. But in fact, the brain is unbelievably complex system. And if you actually would read in the paper that Shireen and Lyons and I wrote about EMDR, you'd have to do a lot of going through the dictionary, because it activates circuits from the temporoparietal junction on the right with your left insula. So that allows your mind and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex circuit gets activated. It allows your mind to experience that as belonging to the past as opposed to belonging to the present. So beware of biobabble, because every clinician now knows the word amygdala. So amygdala. So okay. I mean, people scared. But is it amygdala? Maybe it's paraxylary grade. Maybe it's the thalamus. And you don't really need to know all of that. For me, it's interesting because it shows that there's brain circuitry that you cannot organize by understanding and cognition, or by certain drugs. And so what we see is certain circuits get activated, and that the circuit of the brain that helps you to know between past and present gets more clearly associated with the circuit of your brain that registers what goes on in your body. So you have an internal reorganization of experience because electrical circuits get changed in the brain. But in terms of your original question, yes, I hear that a lot of people get agitated in EMDR, and that's where your tracking capacity comes in. And that's also why I happen to love the eye movements and not a mechanical device, because the eye movements, my body really picks up the agitation or the quietness of the bodies I'm dancing with in a way, and I can slow down my eye movements, sometimes do very slow, and then the system comes down. And I do it faster, then more memories start coming up. And so it's not just you just move your damn fingers about, it's really the dance that you engage in, very much like what you do when you deal with a crying baby. You don't put a bunch of tappers on a crying baby. You really find out what it is that baby needs to calm itself down. As people get agitated when you do EMDR, your job is, so what can I do to calm the system down? Does tapping on both knees help? Does butterfly tap help? Or does very slow eye movement? So that's really where you come in, and AI cannot take your place yet to do it for you. These are not formulas. These are interactional processes where you pick up your physiological arousal. That's why getting trained in somatic therapies is so helpful, because they're particularly good in helping you to do that. Yeah.
And why we spent so much time in this EMDR program, bringing in the somatics and building that next. Yeah. Sorry, Carrie, go ahead.
No, I was just wanting to see if Molly wanted to ask their question.
Molly, if you want to raise your
Sure.
digital hand. If not, we can also read the question.
Am I seeing Molly up there? No, not yet. Okay. So I see two questions from Molly. Why does BLS desensitize challenging memories and yet taps in or deepens resourcing or positive feelings? I assume that if it desensitizes a feeling or sensation, it would also desensitize the positive, how one might work with an addict to reduce.
Can you say
Yeah, again.
again the whole question?
Sure. Say it again. Okay.
Yeah.
Why does BLS desensitize challenging memories and yet taps in or deepens resourcing or positive feelings? I might assume that if it desensitizes a sensation or feeling, it would also desensitize the positive, like how one might.
But that's we don't desensitize. That's a very fundamental difference with exposure treatment, where you say you desensitize people, and that's what you see when you see people after exposure treatment. You say, oh yeah, nothing bothers me anymore. Like indeed, people become desensitized. No, with EMDR, and it's a paper that Jim Hopper and I wrote and never published, and then some things I really regret not having done that. But we showed with EMDR is that EMDR it does desensitize. It helps to make a memory of the past. And in fact, you become more alive because you put so much energy in trying to control that damn stuff that you become desensitized to the world around you. But once that memory is just a memory of something that really sucked, but it happened years ago, you go like, okay, that's over. Thank God I survived this. But you don't desensitize people with EMDR at all. In fact, thank you for your question, because I think this is a big difference between CBT and exposure treatment and EMDR. And indeed, you don't desensitize people. You help people to know where it belongs in their mind and in their lives. Do you get that? The person who asked the question, really very critical question, actually. Yeah.
And I think there was a interesting secondary question of that, is like how the same movement or the same action can help create that process that you just referred to, but also deepen a experience, like when there's a new sensation, or I mean, in classical EMDR, like positive cognition, how that sort of sets it into
positive cognition. That's Vera's particular background. She came from a Philadelphia active. Her pedigree was the wrong pedigree. It has nothing to do with cognition. The cognition is sort of an epiphenomenal. The frontal lobe is a meaning-making system that helps you to explain what goes into your body further on. Once you change the core issue way back then, your front lobe isn't working so hard to make excuses for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I've heard this question before around just that slow and why is fast and slow different. And so I don't know if there's anything, just why is it that it brings in these positive feelings in the slow?
Well,
And
I don't think it's not the issue of positive feelings.
mm,
It's about making it possible for the brain mind to go there, to observe it, and to arrange it where it belongs.
gotcha. hmm
Yeah.
So
Same
in
way,
fast and slow, it does the same.
like I always encourage people to just have more children, and then hang out, hang out with babies. And some babies you need to walk vigorously, and some babies you need to go very slow with, and they're different requirements. And you one size doesn't fit all. We
Mhm.
cannot be a little robot to shake that baby. It is our interaction that makes it possible for the systems to calm down. And so don't exclude yourself from the dyad. The part of what I love about EMDR is a very dyadic relationship. It's very much like somatic processing. And the eye movements, you do it together. I don't understand people who want to hide themselves behind mechanical devices to do EMDR. Completely uninteresting, actually. Because it is our body helping each other to get in sync with ourselves.
Mhm.
That's my thing.
Bessel, I have to say, I think that's the best analogy I've heard as to why, or example as to why, pacing, like tempo and rhythm or duration is really client centered. Like as infants, it's so true. You wouldn't rock one baby the same as another, or this
Yeah.
the sound of a vacuum might be soothing to one, and the sound of water might be soothing to, like,
Or drive them crazy.
or drive them crazy. Especially if they have like misotonia or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been hearing the term neural entrainment. Do you feel like that is part of this here of kind of having that internal rhythm
People
that
invent that
matches?
term. Like
Mhm.
People
What
love
was
a
that?
term.
people find their little term to put a little R after. I've discovered this amazing thing, and no, you haven't.
Um, I'm just going through the questions. Um, Marissa, do you want to ask? Let's see if you want to raise your hand and ask your question. It's a great question. Um, all right. Oh, Molly, I see you now. We can come back to you, love.
Sorry.
Hi, Marissa.
Oh, there we go. That's better. Hi. So great to be here and to hear you all speak. My question was about generational or intergenerational trauma. Because Carrie did a class on that the other day, and that's something I'm very interested in and that people keep bringing to me. And so I was wondering, Bessel, like how you felt EMDR incorporates with generational trauma.
I don't see the linear connection. Like, as Larkin said, we have to clean it up for webcasts. They screw you up, your mom and dad. And they do. And you'll screw up your kids too, in their own way. So, like, we all deal with intergenerational trauma, and we carry it on. And I don't see a particular relationship with EMDR, except EMDR is a body treatment. It's about dealing with people's agitation, people's physiological responses, and calming them down. So, yeah, where it comes from, yeah, your mom probably screws you up. Absolutely, no question about it. But it doesn't matter right now because now you're living with the nervous system that you have and deal with it. Yeah.
Well, I
Doesn't
think
that
that's sorry.
like the intergenerational trauma? It sort of helps you to see the burdens that we all accumulate. But it's going to be interesting. The new generation, your kids, will have movies taken of them their whole life, so you can actually see how they reacted. I don't have any movies of me before age 18, so you don't know what my life is like. But you also understand as you do your work that different people, different things have affected you in different ways over time, and your perspective on that changes. The perspective of most people. Now, I'm a geezer, and most people I know who have done a lot of work and various treatments go like, my parents did the best they could. Boy, were they fucked up. Too bad they didn't know how to enjoy their kids more. Or too bad they were so uptight. Bad they were so angry. I feel really sorry for them that they didn't get to enjoy me as this wonderful little baby. But do we carry all those things inside of ourselves? Yeah, that's who we are. All of us do. I don't know anybody who doesn't have transgenerational trauma. You know, anybody who has been coming from a normal families without any abnormal people for 2 generations, like they don't exist.
All right. Thank you. I'm just reading through these quick. Oh, this is a question from Barbara. I'll read it because it's relatively short. About what have been the ways that you have found to better track, to learn these tracking skills that you're referring to that emerge? Like, how do you become a Peter and Pat? Like, is it innate? What are the things that have helped you learn those tracking skills?
Well, we're in a great field. Our teachers pay us money to teach us.
Oh, the actual teacher, yeah.
How lucky we are. Basically, we start off life getting a license to malpractice. We don't know anything after we get out of school. And then we start treating people, and the people you treat slowly teach you how to do it properly. You didn't learn it from your textbook. You learn it from your practice. So you learn it. And you also learn it by being on both the giving and the receiving end of the issue. And that in the opening treatment chapter of my book, I say, always ask your therapist if what the therapy they're going to do on you has been personally helpful for them. And if the answer is, oh, but I didn't need it, you go, good for you. Have a good day. You need to know subjectively what you're doing for other people. And in order to become an EMDR therapist, you do your own EMDR. Body therapy, you do your own body therapy. You'll come up with what it is that you need, and you become one of your many subjects from whom you learn. And you work with people who are good trackers, and you observe them and you see them. I say, this is not textbook stuff. The way I was trained, I went to extremely good training program. We were at Harvard. We were not allowed to read any textbooks during the first year. And we were told, you have only one textbook, and that's your patients. And I think that's a good training. And so you learn from patients, and you make your videotapes. And you watch yourself working. Don't show it to anybody, because you'll be embarrassed like hell when you see yourself working and see that you do stupid things, you interrupt people, you didn't pick up on cues. Observe yourself, videotape yourself, and maybe find one very kind and thoughtful friend who to show it to see how good you are in terms of tracking, not tracking.
I love that. Yeah, I think it's really important to spend time watching yourself in sessions and noticing not only what like you're observing, but how are you in the space.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I always just loved and admired about both Pat Ogden and Peter Levine. They always show their videotapes, and videotapes are data.
Yeah.
And so when people want to show me their work, I say, show me your work. Don't tell me about your work, because the frontal lobe is by nature a lying frontal lobe. Frontal lobe just wants to tell stories and be approved of. But a videotape will show you what's really going on.
Yeah.
You're astounded by the difference between how you recall things and what you'll see in your videotapes. Like, oh, we don't know ourselves very well,
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's also interesting the way we don't necessarily hear the way we language, we perceive like that we do it a certain way, and then when we watch our videos or listen to recordings of our sessions, it's quite different, or the tone is registered different than what we thought it
Oh,
was,
it-
or
we're not,
rhythm.
no, we can't actually. We're just not programmed
Yeah.
to be as attentive to ourselves as to you. You know,
Mm,
I know things about you right now that you don't even know about yourself, or vice versa.
like what? I'm just kidding.
Wow.
We have time for maybe one or two more questions. Carrie, did you see some that came to mind?
Well, I just know there are a couple of people who had their hands up for a while, so I just wanted to see if maybe Tasha wanted to ask a question. I don't know if it's if I'm pronouncing that correctly, hopefully.
Sorry,
Hello, yes. This is
Hi.
Tasha.
Thank you first off for your book. It's life-changing. In my industry, we do a lot of hands-on. And I'm just curious because of the timeline. Like we work with a lot of clients where we're not working with them for a very long term period. We might be working with them. I teach empowerment self-defense. So we might be working with them for maybe like 40 hours maximum. Most of the clients that I work with often, we're doing like an 8-hour training and then they're off doing their thing.
Are you doing impact or something?
Huh?
You do impact model mugging, or do you
Oh,
sell?
no, I'm trained in that.
Yeah.
I've done 56 hours in that, but I actually created my own curriculum based off of life experiences for like the past 23 years. So with like stocking, roofing, a whole bunch of different things, I actually looked at my experience and then looked at research. Some of it's yours, some of it's in different areas like the gift of fear, and a combination of those, and combined it into a curriculum for women who have experienced trauma, mostly like BIPOC women, since I live on the island. But I'm just curious if there's,
John.
I live in Lahaina in Hawaii.
Oh, oh, that
Yeah,
little
so
fire.
I travel between there and Washington working with tribes. There's a lot of intergenerational trauma, but there's also a lot when it comes to just being an Indigenous woman. And I'm just curious if EMDR, if you find that short-term work with EMDR is ineffective, or if you believe that that you could have a breakthrough utilizing EMDR in that short period of time.
Well, it depends on what you work with. Being from Lahaina, you guys saw a lot of bad stuff happening there. And I imagine that buildings going up in flames and sounds, and a lot of people there are very triggered probably by a lot of sensations related to the fire. And I think EMDR might be extremely helpful. I actually would use it as the first line of defense against acute adult onset trauma, would be my first choice. But when you start dealing with intergenerational trauma, of course, you open up all kind of other floodgates. And that, of course, happens as the tough thing about doing trauma treatment. Has you have some people in Lahaina being messed up by the fire. You start doing EMDR, and then their childhood sexual abuse starts coming up, and the family violence starts coming up. And so, to some degree, part of the art of being a good therapist is to see if you can sort of contain it to the recent trauma and not open up all the floodgates before, because that may add another 5 years of therapy. That may not be necessary. So that's really where the art comes in. Can you just deal with that piece that right now is really triggering you?
Okay.
But that's really the art of complex therapy, actually.
Hello.
But dealing with acute trauma like you guys had in Lahaina, EMDR would be actually my treatment of choice.
Okay. Thank you. Mahalo for your time.
Thanks. Bessel, in one of your research studies, I believe you did 3 sessions before doing the evaluation 3 treatments of EMDR.
I think
And
that's about right.
yeah,
No,
uh,
we had 8 week sessions. No, we started off with 3 weeks, and it's only it's interesting. We found that 3 weeks of EMDR was for many people enough to
Yeah.
deal with trauma,
Yeah.
but we were comparing it with Prozac, and
Yes.
we could not expect Prozac to do anything in 3 weeks, so we had to make an 8-week study to give Prozac a chance to catch up with the EMDR. It never did it.
No. That's so interesting. Okay. Yeah. All right. Molly, I said we would come back to you, love, so sorry about that. Is there a follow-up question?
Yes. Am I on? Hi, thank you so much for your bravery and your instinct and this profound life-changing work. It's game-changing for myself and all my clients. And I'm also a huge advocate from the felt sense in sitting with psychedelics about the game-changing work on complex developmental trauma, PTSD with cancer. So what my question is can you use BLS in the background if you're in the window of tolerance of a session? What's that?
BLS?
Bilateral.
Yeah, bilateral or EMDR buzzers, like in the background of a session, if someone is in the window of tolerance, for example, your psychodrama session or even MDMA session. So it's fortifying, calming the nervous system, possibly deepening or helping some of the brain re-regulation. Just wondering your thoughts on that, because I may or may not have been utilizing it in that way.
No.
And finding it to be helpful in my felt sense with most clients who already take to it.
I'm not that big of a fan. See, the way my take on this is that we have a very religious field. And when people get trained in one thing, they start buying into the religion of that. So then they learn about psychedelic agents and they say, oh, I'd like to continue to do Freudian psychoanalysis and combine it with psychedelics, or do EMDR or exposure treatment. I would say just do psychedelic therapy and see what's missing. Become a really good psychedelic therapist. The thing that I think is missing most in psychedelic therapies is people knowing how to work with the body. I think on many psychedelic sessions, a lot of body stuff comes up, and most therapists don't have a clue what to do with it. And my wife, Lisha Sky, is very much helping people to get trained in how to work with the body in psychedelics. But I would not add EMDR or IFS. Even, we all treat an IFS. Patients spontaneously start speaking IFS language on psychedelics often. But I would not introduce other treatment modalities. I really go, but very much focus on helping that body to get input that makes it feel safe.
Wonderful. And in a psychodrama session, would you use it underlying in a way to help calm the nervous system?
Never used EMDR in a psychodrama session. No, stay in the frame. I create alternative realities for people and keep it clean, like I always became a surgeon. I love surgery because it's clean. I do very precise. Don't mix up too many things in it, I'd say. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I love IFS, so thank you so much for being a champion of that as well.
And IFS is a very good sort of fundamental way of looking at the world. Again, it's not the whole story, but very useful as a basic framework. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think we can take one more question and then we'll say our dues. Aaron. Hi, Aaron. Let's see you.
Oh my, I was like next in line for a while and I was like so nervous. So hi, Dr. Bessel. Thank you so much for your talk. I know you talked a lot about psychodrama and did a lot of work with yoga, and I hear dance and movement mentioned here and there. And I am a dance movement therapist, and I know Scott has done BMC with Bonnie Bainbridge. And I'm wondering if you can speak to your thoughts on movement, expressive movement, dance, and we tend to call it expanding the movement repertoire, as far as like we don't have certain access to movement based on our past. And so when we engage in a new movement, it's like creating that new movement in the moment, that new memory. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that and how you use expressive movement.
No, I would not. I would consider myself a student. So when you say that, I go, that's really interesting. I can really see how that can be very helpful for people. I personally have not studied it, but one sort of funny thing I like to say is, if you have $5 million lying around in your trust fund, give me money. I'd like to study tango dancing versus CBT for PTSD. I think a lot of dances have traditionally been used for treating trauma. I'm convinced that in Buenos Aires, Argentina is a very traumatized country. They had to invent yoga dancing, tango dancing, because it's such a beautiful way of getting bodies to be aligned to each other, which is exactly what goes wrong in trauma. I think it's a wide open field. No, the paradigm right now is to put people on scanners and render them motionless. So dancing is about as far away from the basic scientific paradigm as you can get, because you cannot put people on a scanner and dance at the same time. But I think the integration of your movement with other people's movement is very much at the core of good therapy. Every kindergarten teacher knows that. We should all learn from kindergarten teachers, because they deal with kids who are very much like traumatized kids' brains, like they're all over the place and dysregulated, and getting kids to move together and to do that makes a lot of sense. So I'd say, do what you're doing, try to do whatever research you can do to back it up. It's great. Go for it.
Thank you so much, Bessel. Such a pleasure as always, my friend. And Carrie, thank you so much for doing this with me. And thank you all for coming to this fun conversation with Dr. Bessel on his experience of EMDR. And it's just been such a pleasure. Thank you all. Have a beautiful rest of your day. I'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you, Bessel.
Bye, Bessel.
Bye.
Bye.